Hey guys, it's Crossroads here. Today we're going to talk about Coinbase and a new product they announced today, which they kind of announced last week. And we'll talk about whether or not this is going to kill off PayPal, Visa, Mastercard, Stripe, Adyen, and many, many more as well. So, what is this product? Well, we really need to go back to last week because we actually knew about this announcement, or not this specific announcement, but we knew that something like this was coming. Coinbase and Shopify announced last week that they were bringing USDC. This is Circle's stablecoin as payments to Base for a lot of merchants as far as availability. And so this was a pretty neat announcement that they announced, and shouldn't be a huge surprise here. We can actually see what this checkout flow looks like. That you go in, actually looks a lot like PayPal. But you go in and you select USDC, pay with crypto, payment successful, and done. And the benefit of that was very cheap fees for merchants. They can auto convert USDC into whatever the native currency is. And Shopify at some point in the summer will even offer a 1% cash back on USDC type of transactions. So it's like, yeah, that's pretty cool. That's neat. They launched and they focused on the engineering side of it last week as well. Which I hadn't gotten around to read to until now. And the reason why I'm reading it now is because Coinbase had a further announcement. Now, this is the same product, but not in partnership with Shopify. Shopify was an early adopter. But this is them saying that they're powering the future of e-commerce by introducing Coinbase payments. And so rather than having Coinbase basically just being used for Web3 applications for the most part and some remittances, they say, hey, we can actually handle commerce as well. And so they go into this whole thing. I'm not going to go too much into the stack, but it's a pretty basic but interesting. It's not a bad thing at all. I think the engineering is quite good. Where they enable a lot of different merchants and a lot of different people, even like Visa and Mastercard or potentially PayPal, to use this product and build off of it. So this is something that we'll be seeing a lot more of, not just from Coinbase, but a lot of people that are involved in stablecoin. And what's really interesting is the market seems to have forgotten PayPal has already done this with PayUSD. Now, it's a little bit different because you're not having as direct of a partnership as what Coinbase seems like they're doing on the engineering side, but this can integrate with any merchant there. You can pay with crypto of any form, and PayPal actually automatically converts it for people. If they're buying it with something other than PayUSD, it can convert in PayUSD. It can convert back into USD or whatever the currency is on the other side. And this is something that's like old news. And it's not just PayPal doing this. Visa, Mastercard, Stripe are all involved in crypto projects of their own. I think Mastercard's a little bit behind, but Visa is on top of it. And there's a lot of other companies too, like Adyen, that are kind of getting into it. They're held back a little bit because of their US banking license. So what exactly is going on here? Well, let's take a look at their payment stack, and then we'll talk about the implications as well. So this is on their Base developers engineering site. So this is Coinbase specifically. And this is something that they launched in conjunction with the Shopify announcement last week. And as they go into it, they talk about some of the benefits. Cheaper is a little bit of a misnomer, and we're going to talk about that. Now, they do say the transaction fees are typically less than a cent and will continue to get less. There is some savings there, but it's not nearly as much as they intimate, just because they're not going into the full payment stack. That's not really what this is, except for a couple of specific use cases. So as you go through, they have these diagrams. They show what they're able to do as far as escrow architecture, operators, and that sort of thing. Let's just look at this one right here. Here is their payment flow. And so in essence, this is what it looks like when you come in and you want to make a transaction, and also from a merchant's perspective. So at the merchant storefront, a buyer selects a wallet. So you have to get your phone, you pull up your wallet. It needs to be the Base wallet, the Coinbase wallet specifically. You request signature from the merchant. The buyer then signs it and returns a signature, and then the payment is then authorized. So it goes from merchant storefront to buyer wallet, then to the operator service. And here it actually submits a transaction, executes the authorization. Buyer funds are then escrowed. And so they're held basically until there's a transaction receipt. That's, by the way, a nice, clever design. If they didn't do that, I'd be like, oh man, they messed up. So they know what they're doing here. It's very simple, but it's good. And then ultimately, the payment is authorized, the buyer is shown payment confirmation, and then they walk out of the storefront. Now, a lot of this, I think more so than anything, will be used probably in an e-commerce standpoint. I don't think that wallets, especially Coinbase Wallet, is going to see wide scale adoption by consumers. And there's a few reasons why. So one of those is you as a consumer, at least right now, something would have to change otherwise. You have to front load USDC on your wallet and have enough balance there. Otherwise, what's happening at the storefront, and imagine this in the physical store, that you go to check out with your phone and you select. You have to make sure that this specific merchant allows USDC payments. You select the wallet on the checkout stand, and then it requests a signature, and then you go ahead and sign, and then it says, "Hey, there's not enough here," and so then you have to exit, back out all of that, go into the base wallet, which you're already in, and buy more USDC, maybe sell some coins and convert that, and all while people behind you are waiting in line. That's not great. Alternatively, maybe nobody's waiting in line, but it still takes some time. Or even if you're just sitting at home and you're on the website and you're going to check out and you don't have it there, we know as a fact that any points of friction that you add into the checkout process really, really hurts the checkout conversion. And so merchants that adopt this, I think, are going to see a lot lower checkout conversion for those that are willing to use it. And again, there's friction on the front end because you have to be a Coinbase customer. You have to install the wallet. You have to move funds from a payment source over, and then you have to convert it to USDC and make sure that there's enough before you go in and look to check out. So it's a big ask from a consumer standpoint. There needs to be an incredible incentive here. And from the consumer side, there's not. 1% cashback, you're like, hey, that's awesome. I mean, look at most major credit cards. You're getting a lot better than 1%. There's some out there like the Robinhood Gold Card, you get 3% in. So from the consumer side, there is friction and there's not enough incentive for them to overcome the friction. So this, from the consumer side, is not going to see wide scale adoption. Now, merchants can incentivize it certainly. And Shopify is doing that sort of as not so much as a merchant, but a merchant hub. But it would have to be heavily, at least initially, incentivized for people to actually use it. And what usually happens in those cases when there's a lot of friction, but there's a pretty big incentive. Let's say I use this and I get $10 back. It's like, well, I'll do that. That's great. As long as my transaction is $50 or more. Some people won't, but it's like, hey, it's 10 free bucks, a little bit of time, but I'll do it once. And I'll say, well, I'm not going through that again. Got my $10. I'm good. And so it's a challenge. Now, as far as other issues that I see here on the front end, so let's go back to the diagram. We see the buyer selecting the wallet, requesting signature, buyer signs, signature is back. That is not a one-click checkout process at all. Now, the signature itself, it can be a thumbprint. It can be like a simple authorization as well, but there's a little bit more friction here than a lot of the one-click checkout methods that PayPal, that Stripe, that Adyen, and many others actually offer and have offered for a long time that see very high conversion simply because there's fewer steps and there's a lot less friction. Now, another issue here as well is that Coinbase doesn't really address is KYC, know your customer. Now, this from the standpoint of the customer, a lot of times the payment issuer takes care of this on the front end. So I've used this diagram a number of times, but this is fintechbrainfood.com. It's from them. This is the anatomy of a transaction as it stands now. Now, there is complexity here too, but what happens is when you go in with a credit card, again, you're getting 2 or 3% cash back, and you just whip it out of your wallet and tap to pay, and you're done. You go to the store, $100 charge. Then it goes into the payment service provider, which requests for funds. Payment service provider, of course, makes sure everything is legit as far as that there's funds there, that the merchant is legit and handles issues, which happen actually with great regularity, where that first payment attempt, it doesn't go through immediately. There's some sort of issue. Perhaps you're trying to use a expired credit card, something like that. And if you're online, a lot of times PayPal can just reroute that. Stripe can do this. Adyen can do this. Many others can. Coinbase, they can't. Maybe there's a workaround in the future through partnerships, but there's going to be a high bounce rate at that point. Payment service provider gets 97.65. Well, that's on the back end. So they send this over to the merchant acquirer. The acquirer takes 10 cents. That's a small take rate. Visa and Mastercard, they're probably the best known major payment rails here in the United States. By the way, Visa is working with stablecoin. I don't think that they or Mastercard are going to be nearly as disrupted, especially Visa. But their take rate is only 15 cents for the digital payment rails. There's an argument that stablecoin is substantially cheaper, and it's pretty cheap. USDC would save a little bit of funds and a little bit of money, and at scale that's meaningful, but it's not nearly the savings as you anticipate. The biggest cost here is the issuer. Who is the issuer? Well, in this experiment, it's basically from the credit card issuer. So the bank that I get my credit card from, a lot of times, like for instance, the Robinhood Gold Card, it's Coastal Community Bank that it's run through. And so that bank there gets that $2.10, in this case, I think it's $1.80 or whatever interchange fee, or at least part of it. They share part of it with Robinhood as well. Anyway, the importance of the issuer is to make sure that me as the user, that I'm going to not be a credit risk. In other words, it'll look at my credit score, it'll look at my income, it'll look at a lot of different things, a debt level as well, and make sure that I'm not just out there charging, $100,000 on a used yacht or something. But the problem with Coinbase is this almost functions like a preloaded debit card. Those products exist where you load a certain amount on a debit card, and they never get much traction just because there's a lot of friction. This is going to be the exact same issue on the consumer side. So another big source of friction, which users are not going to like at all, is if you have an issue with your transaction. In other words, you're sending that payment and it's just not going through. Well, the funds have been taken out of your wallet and they've been put in escrow. So they're not going to the receiver. So they're not gone. That's the good news. You have to manually go in as a user and actually reclaim this as well. Now, is that a complicated process? No, I don't think so. I think it'll be pretty simple. Coinbase does have very good engineering, but it adds another point of friction where instead of just retaining the money, or at least giving the appearance of retaining the money, you have to manually and physically go in and request those funds. What can happen? What can go wrong with that? Well, somebody might try to send it again and again, exit out, go back in, and all of a sudden they have a lot of money that's piling up. Their wallet is empty. It creates a lot of confusion, a lot of chaos. This is not the best design. And I'm sure that Coinbase will work on it. It's one of the things that they do mention at the very end of this engineering, essentially a white paper, is that they are building future products, future usability. They mentioned a couple of the features as well. So this will get built out more and more, but it's tough. The dispute layer, I don't know what they're doing there. There's nothing there specifically. Like if I have a product that has an issue, and it needs to go into dispute. Well, PayPal knows how they handle that. Stripe, Adyen, they know how to handle that. Merchants know how to handle that. Coinbase, not so much. So it really has to be handled by the merchant side, and usually they don't want to be involved intimately in that, at least as far as e-commerce. Maybe some do. We'll have to see. But there's some challenges here. There's a lot of friction. Now, on the side of the merchants are looking at this, and there is some integration that they would have to do on their end. It's not challenging, but not everybody has a team like this. I think that there's going to be a good bit of adoption from merchants themselves, and they'll definitely try it. Just because if you look at the cost savings itself, and like any third party can really build on this, that's really cool. But if you're able to skirt around that whole complex diagram here, and again, you can't do credit cards for this. It's not going to work. Debit cards. It has to specifically be that wallet. Then instead of getting back 96.80 or whatever, you might get back maybe 99.50. It's not going to be 1 cent just because there are some layers that need to be there. So the merchants will look at this. They'll absolutely want this. Consumer side, I don't know. I don't know that the incentives are there. Can they be built out? Can some of these things be overcome? Yes, they can. But at the same time, again, PayPal is already involved in stablecoin. They've not done as much with it as I had hoped that they would. I'll just be frank. It's been a disappointment on that end. I call it as it is. But PayPal is hardly dead in the water with this. So what's the takeaway as it relates to Visa and MasterCard? Are they dead in the water or are they okay? Well, I think that there is a little bit of friction here. I just don't think it's nearly as much as what the market has seemed to indicate last week and also this week with PayPal, with Visa, and with MasterCard. Those have been hit very big. Adyen as well. payment service providers really remove a lot of friction for the consumer that you just show up, tap to pay, you're done. It's very quick. Know your customer is handled, compliance is handled. You don't have any risks with Swift payments and payment overseas where you shouldn't be, where there's sanctions. There's a lot of regulatory issues that stablecoin just doesn't handle very well. There's not friction on the front end. There's not friction with merchants. The biggest challenge for them is it is an expensive process, which payment service providers are only a small part of that process, but still, that's a challenge right there. Now, PayPal is using stablecoin and is going to make things cheaper on their end, and they may be able to bypass some of this as well on their end with PayUSD. They're already doing that. Visa likewise will, as well as they continue to build out those digital payment rails on the stablecoin network that they're designing. Mastercard, I'm less certain of. I think that one will be okay, but I wouldn't bet on Mastercard. There's some disruption there for sure. One of those advantages that these networks have beyond just having that seamless friction, beyond having like the points that are there as an incentive for the consumer, is of course trust, which people, I don't know that they'll trust Coinbase, especially after that massive hack and issue that they had not really too long ago. It's just kind of unknown in the payment space. It'll take a while to gain that kind of trust outside in real world commerce outside of the Web3 stuff. And the other issue is as far as like this process right here, there's a lot of friction on this end and there's a lot of features missing. So there's no guest checkout, which is frictionless. There's no one-touch checkout. There's a lot of things that have to happen on the front end and the back end. And all of those things, merchants might look in this and be like, oh man, this is great. We're going to save some money. But history has shown that when merchants are all about just saving money in the bottom line because somebody cheaper comes, and PayPal again did this with Braintree, their payment service provider that's a white label service. Saving money is not everything. It's checkout conversion that really, really, really matters for them. So if this, and we don't know, we'll have to find out. Maybe it's going to be far, far better as far as checkout conversion than I expect. But I think there's just too much friction here and too many pieces that are missing that make it seamless. But if the checkout conversion here is like 10% lower than what you get with a Stripe, an Adyen, a PayPal, merchants are not going to be excited about that at all. They're just not going to be. So is it insurmountable for Coinbase? Absolutely not. But the market's reaction today is kind of ridiculous. And the companies that are supposedly being disrupted, they're using this technology too. They're not exactly just sitting things around, although it still is an interesting launch by Coinbase. Anyway, let me know what you think in the comments. Is PayPal completely dead and gone? Visa, MasterCard, likewise, are they disrupted? Is there something that I'm missing or overlooked? This is new again as of this week. And so I'm sure there's some things and pieces that I'm perhaps underestimating. Would love to hear that in the comments. And as always, thank you for watching, commenting, and subscribing. Until next time, happy investing.